Binu, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Derek.
Yesterday you spoke about a boom and bust cycle as far as the industry is concerned. Can you elaborate a little bit more in depth what you actually meant by that?
Yeah, I think when you look at the progress of at least digital technology within the industry, in the oil and gas industry, what you see in the oil and gas industry is maybe more heterogeneity, where individual companies have different systems. Whenever there's a deceleration, then people leave the industry. So you actually see this mass exodus of people. And when you come into the next cycle, you're starting away from different points again.
So the oil industry was lagging a little bit because it was going through some good times, and then suddenly it's now catching up and going really, really fast with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have oil prices at very high levels,
yeah.
I think the emphasis on operational efficiency drops.
Yeah.
But when it drops, then when the price drops, then you have a lot more push into that.
Now, moving forward in terms of, and we saw the beautiful AI product that you will be demonstrating soon. How is technology like this fundamentally changing the industry that we are in right now?
I think it's dramatically changing the way that you can have different parts of the organization work together effectively. And I think in terms of really enabling people and productivity, I don't see it as an issue of job displacement. I think what you're going to see is for the things that we need to do, making the jobs that we have right now as productive as possible is absolutely where we can provide more value.
When you come back to this part of the world, we work with ADNOC and all of the other big oil companies that are here. What are the kinds of relationships are you developing in terms of fundamentals, development of scale? Because I think that really is one of the key things that the insights that I picked up from yesterday. How do we build scale within those technological solutions?
Well, I think the key thing is an ecosystem, right? I mean, technology is an enabler, but a lot of what you need to do to make it effective is to have it, percolate through an organization. And that requires, I think, one, commitment from within an organization, but also, I think, with partners and other groups around the area. I think that's absolutely key in building that up, that culture up.
One of the things we talk, and we're looking at Mad Talks as a simple platform about making a difference in this society. How is Baker Hughes, GE, making a difference in society, especially when it comes to, one is innovation we've discussed, but secondly is about youth. I mean, you're an amazingly successful organization. You can attract the best minds. How do you do that? Where are the young people in your industry?
Well, I think there's a lot of activity going on right now within colleges around the sort of technologies that we're building up right now, right? And one of the things that we have as a particular challenge is how do you interest people like that to come into industries like oil and gas? I think the progress that we can show is just how the world is changing with these technologies, and that's interesting. That's fundamentally interesting to people. It's something I can relate to because I came in from a software background. And it was the possibility of applying these technologies to an industry like oil and gas that's exciting for me and my team. And I think it's fundamentally exciting for young people. And I think it's something that you've mentioned several times before, right? How do you pair the technological aspects of it, but with in terms of context, right? Philosophy, ethics, the things that excite young people.
You spoke about technology, but you also spoke about physics. Can you share that? Because I thought it was a beautiful comment in terms of us having a more holistic view of science and research and development.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a lot of people in oil and gas, I think they're very familiar with physics and physics models. That's what the engineering teams have been built up. And it's actually been a little bit of a challenge because while we have tremendous modeling capability, the applicability of those in getting actual outcomes, bringing it to the users who are using that on an ongoing basis has been difficult. But to me, I see this as a synthesis. That background, that capability, the techniques you can do with AI, being able to pull that all together into applications that actually drive things forward, that's where I see things going. So it's a synthesis.
I see a lot of great organizations, huge organizations here, and one of the metaphors I use, it's like an aircraft carrier. It takes a lot of time to move. However, we're living in an exponential world. Everything needs to move really, really rapidly. And large organizations are just not able to respond at that speed. So what is your advice to large organizations? Should they be working with a lot of startups? Should they be working with smaller organizations? Or create or split themselves and break them up and create lots of small companies rather than one big, massive aircraft carrier?
I think it's going to be a combination of all of those. The benefit of a large organization is one of scale, right, and efficiencies. But as you rightly point out, you lose a certain amount of agility. So I think what we're seeing these days is both working with a large ecosystem of small, agile companies, partnering as much as possible, but within the large company, also creating individual organizations that have this job of really driving innovation, driving culture. So that combination.
Oil and gas, I've learned a lot over the last couple of days in the research that I was doing. It is a real hardcore, solid industry. Now, on the other side, you've got Amazon and Google and others that are very sexy industries. How do you make yourself sexy?
That actually is something, as I was saying with the attraction to me and my team has been that when you're looking at oil and gas, the amount of data, the amount of the number of things that are happening, it's quite a remarkable industry. And so I think if you can show just the sheer sophistication of all of these pieces, when you think about even just core oil and gas, the fact that you can actually send a drill bit tens of thousands of feet down, tens of thousands of feet horizontally, be able to pull energy literally out of the ground, I think some of the things we're doing right now make that actually quite visible. And you can see how you can change the world and do things more safely, more environmentally sensitively. I think these are all things that you can do to show that.
Putting my deep futurist hat on, as we look forward into the horizon, we see a world of abundance, of abundant energy. And as things get more and more efficient, the price of energy becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, which effectively changes the equation and the model, the business model that we have at this point in time. Our paradigms change completely. So if we project ourselves, say, 20 years, 25 years from now, how do you see the world of abundant energy, low energy costs, maybe even free energy? How does the world look in your eyes at that point in time?
I think it's something that you're going to see where as you increase consumption, as you get into an economy of abundance, then some of the kind of interesting side effects of that I think that we'll have to deal with is things like environmental impact, right? So as you do that, you need to make sure that things are done safely, things are done in such a way that you're not causing additional damage. And I think there'll be a lot of work in that space.
Is solar a hype because I know in about over 30 countries, according to the World Economic Forum, the price of producing solar is actually now below the price of producing fossil fuels. And if you project yourself forward again 10, 15 years, according to people like Elon Musk and others, this is really the holy grail now. Solar energy can provide us with cheap, available energy and putting it into these gigafactories and so on. How do we engage with that? And is this a realistic scenario, or are we it's going to be 2, 3, 4% of the overall business that we have?
Well, I think Professor Carl Rose yesterday talked about that a bit. I think you are going to see renewables accelerate at a pace that I think is faster than people had expected. But exponential curves off of still small levels still means that there's going to be a huge need for additional forms of energy. I think the challenges with renewables right now are in terms of storage, intermittency. So I think you're going to see that take over things like transportation in a number of ways. But chemical production, baseload generation, there's still a very big place for, I think, oil and gas to play.
Do you have kids?
I do.
What do you tell them as they're growing up? And what are they learning? Are they becoming maths and physics experts? And your dad was a professor, and you're a super brain. What do you tell them if they come in and say, I want to be a musician?
I ask them to explore everything that they can because, to that point, one of the things I told you before was that my dad wouldn't necessarily recognize the job that I have right now. It didn't exist, as a head of digital product management 20, 30 years ago, not in this way. And I think that's going to be something that we see across the board. And the next 20 or 30 years, the jobs that you have, I think, are still to be determined. So I think having a generalist education, so music, philosophy education, fundamental math, fundamental physics. I think fundamental science is still is absolutely key. But having that flexibility is going to be absolutely key.
Brilliant. And any final bit of advice that they can do first thing tomorrow morning when they get back to work, and they need to do 1 or 2 things specifically, and actionable things that they can take on tomorrow morning?
Well, it parallels what I tell my kids. I think the beauty of where we exist right now is that the amount of information available, including some of the talks I think you do, is quite incredible. So spend the time to learn more of what's going on, because it's very easy to get into a day-to-day grind. So I have a pretty busy lifestyle, but especially on things like plane flights, I make it a point to try and learn as much as I can about what's going on, especially in an area that's not related to mine, because it's the only way you build up context.
Wonderful advice. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Okay.
Real pleasure.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Big hand.